Let's finish. Antiquity Unveiled, the most marvelous revelations of the 19th century concerning the origin of Christianity. The future life. Professor Hoekema shows in his famous work, called The Glorious Resurrection, that 5,000 years ago, the ancient world dramatized the crucifixion of a god and his resurrection, employing that drama to teach the universal process of the creative cycle, which ancient masters recognize in his changing world of illusion to be in constant operation on all levels of cosmic activity. Now, there's people going on pilgrimage because of, well, this translation in particular, actually the glorious Quran, but that says in it that there's, there's obedience, but there's symbolism. And it's not about the blood or the flesh or, but people have people have changed the meaning of the word myth in English to mean something different than it does in your English Bibles. Stories full of meaning, with purpose. Because they were saying, oh, vicarious. It's not that the myths are about us anymore and that it's something that's supposed to evoke us and provoke us and belief in someone else's vicarious thing. So that's why they switched from their, they switched the meaning of myth on us. This annual event was widely celebrated in the ancient world so far back in the night of time that all traces of its origin are lost. The stone monuments which have resisted the ravages of time reveal that it was celebrated many thousands of years ago. The further back we go, the more evidence appears to prove that in the ancient world, one form of religion was observed by all races. Whether you fall into the Darwin 54 race theory, which is sort of ethnocentric, or the 50, there's less than, 36 plus 6, and 4 and 3. Okay. The evidence is that's the genome type thing, but the race is 19 is the current theory. The evidence is confirmed by what Ptolemy Philadelphus of 309 to 246 of before the Common Era discovered when he offered rich rewards for all kinds of religious manuscripts and scrolls for his great Alexandrian library. Wise men of all countries, impelled by a desire for the reward, went to Alexandria with their choicest scriptures. By this means, Ptolemy succeeded in securing some 280,000 of the most ancient and valuable scriptures in the world. His chief librarian made a careful check of the various writings and was astonished to find that all the ancient systems of worship were copies of one original universal system, which varied in different countries only as the customs of the people varied. I mean, in reality, that's sort of the base of things, but that doesn't mean that different fanaticism and different misassociations and different, obviously the material culture drove some of that, but it didn't make it happen. This blood and soil thing doesn't quite pan out. Marcus Aurelius said, "The universe, compact of all things, is one. Through all things there flows one power, and that power is cosmic electricity," said Dr. David J. Calicchio, maybe, who wrote, "It is now generally admitted by science that an electric force is at work in the universe, and electricity has accordingly been divided by the scientists into two distinct parts: concentrated electricity in the form of electrons and protons, and waves of electricity classified as radiation. The entire universe is powered and moved by the positive and negative forces of electric action, and all the operations in nature, in the earth, and in its elements are carried on by this power, electronology." I guess it's the word. Or maybe it's the chapter name. chronological forgeries have been freely used by the priesthood to make it appear that one particular religious system and its God were older than all the rest. Linguistic terms, people, almost all of this stuff is linguistic terms. There are some spirits of the place, but as a rule, that's not what the actual difference is. The ancient record shows that they all sprung from one primeval universal system, and that record has been preserved by inscriptions on stone monuments and temples of all races and nations, in spite of the destructive work of the various religious fanatics who have striven to obliterate the record of other systems in their effort to make their own appear as the only true religion. Now, there can only be one true religion inflected throughout time and space. But there were two religions, we can say, acting upon each other. There was the Yazidi religion of the past 30,000 years. Yes, the Avestan term Yazdan, worship worthy, and Yazata, meaning, angel, but the implication is the jinn, as Darius the Great said that, oh yeah, they worship the jinn. They worship the Davas, the divs. So obviously the Shayateen menal jinn. Their goal was to become, as clay beings united with the fire beings. They believed in a group of 7, and possibly a group of 7 ruled by 1. Or maybe that could be repeated as the male and the female, as we've seen in the Kumbanda mythology that I recently touched very minorly upon. There was the 1 over the 7, and those are those are the main kingdoms. But it's not just the 1 over each of these 49 kingdoms, and the 7 chiefs of each of these, each group of these. You had, the Exu and the Palmagira, so the male and the female spirits. So it's, and anyways, there's a huge system. Nature record shows they all sprang from one primal universal system, and the record has been preserved by inscriptions on stone monuments and temples of all races and nations, in spite of the destructive work of the various religious fanatics who have striven to obliterate the record of all other systems in their effort to make their own appear as the only true religion. That primal system of religion consisted of a collection of very primitive nature beliefs, wrote Professor Cumont, and in the very course of time, the scheming priesthood gradually transformed it into a system of spiritualized mysteries. The word for the enemies in the Bible, the Ha-Kohanim, the enemies of Jeremiah and the other prophets, the term means those who control the access. Now, you do have a priest class kind of sanctioned, I guess, by mention in the Bible, but doesn't the Bible say not to trust these individuals? So if these so they obviously wrote that into their Bible. But the mysteries are open for all. It's like, I just took out this 114 suwar, and again, that was one of the mysteries illustrated in the seasonal for this year of that cross quarter. That you have these ranks, right? And surah means rank. It means chapter, but it means degree, rank, whatever. So when you learn a chapter, when you go over a chapter, when you read the whole Quran, you're doing a path working. And do you live up to these path workings? So certainly there are mysteries and stuff to go through and enact, but by reading or meditating or whatever. But you're in charge of it. That's how it really should be. You're in charge of your own spiritual life. And that is how the sun worshippers slowly changed to idolaters and became the slaves of spiritualized mysteries. It was the work of the priesthood, and was done to increase their power and to enslave the masses. It turns out that, they've done, it appears like about a third of the Christian clergy don't believe it. And it doesn't, I'm not sure that it's any less common among the Protestants, even though you have Protestants that it turns out to be a volunteer job for them. Although there are some churches that it is I was raised in a church that until you become the top of the international organization, those top 70 plus 12 plus 5 are, the female group. How many is in the female group? 40. Plus their presidency. I don't remember. What's the word? But yeah, you have to really prove yourself over the decades and never hope to get, and never really urge yourself to be in that sort of position. So, there's not believing is very uncommon with that, but a lot of them, you go through ministry school. What are you supposed to do? Your ministry thing. Oh, make money with it. So most of them do believe it. A lot of them that do believe it don't believe it enough to try to be righteous, and particularly in various churches, all these TV preachers. Well, the Bible says to do good to your neighbor, but I have tens of millions of dollars to make in Africa. Pat Robeson doesn't say it that way, but way back in the days of the sun worshippers, the annual celebration of the ancient drama of the crucified God and his resurrection was timed to correspond with the vernal equinox, when generative rays of the golden sun, of the glorious sun, caused the resurrection of the dead, grass and flowers, and the dead forest of the earth to turn green with new life. Remember, the initial color, flag-wise, is the green, as far as the colors of this era. Just plain green, then plain black, then plain white. Technically, I'm wearing the flag of self-mastery by wearing white, aren't I? Behold, asserted the ancient mysteries, the masters, that all nature rises from the dead. Does this great law of the universe apply to only part of the world? To only the vegetal kingdom? Does it not apply to the higher and more important animal, the humanal kingdoms? Well, we're the only ones that can, as far as these physically incarnated beings, that have freedom of choice. No matter how bad the dog misbehaves, I blame its owners or previous owners or something. There's some issues that are always with some animals, but I don't morally criticize animals. And I don't say they're soulless either. As the whole of the universe is made up of the parts, we are warranted in asserting that the whole is governed by the same law that governs any of the parts. It is inconceivable to a rational mind that there is one order of work for the whole and a contrary order of work for any of the parts. Reliable, accurate, and definitive knowledge as to man and life may be gained by a study of the analogies of nature, and that is what we are now doing. As to the value of the law of analogy, Professor W.S. Jevons, University College, London, wrote, "The whole of science consists in the power which confers upon us of applying to one object the knowledge acquired from like objects, and it is only so far as we can discover and register resemblances that we can turn our observations to account. Whoever wishes to acquire a deep acquaintance with nature must observe that there are analogies which connect the whole branches of science in a parallel manner and enable us to infer of one class of phenomena what we know of another." Now, there's a misunderstanding about Yahweh, like it's the proper name rather than than a formula that's appropriate to use referred to God. But it's important to understand that it's interesting to see how the number value of the word for nature and the word of God as a noun and a verb coincide with each other. Al is also a root that kind of addresses that noun and verb thing too, where they say al-he, al-ha, al-him, aluh. It has happened on many occasions that the discovery of an unsuspected analogy between branches of knowledge has been the starting point of a rapid course of valuable discoveries. Principles of Science, page 631. Professor Jevons cites the scientific method that was pursued by the ancient masters in solving the mystery of man and life. By this means, they made astonishing discoveries and recorded them in their scrolls, but these valuable scriptures have been lost and destroyed. The masters discovered the surprising and startling fact that there is no death as we understand that term to mean. Accordingly, in their philosophy, the words die and death do not imply expiration or extinction as we are taught to believe. The terms were employed to indicate rebirth, renovation, regeneration, resurrection, and they cleverly concealed the essence of their discoveries in this field in their famous fable of the crucified and resurrected God. Not an imaginary God in the sky, not the virgin-born son of that imaginary God, but the God that rules the earth. All hail the Lord of this world and age. And so recognized by those who made the Bible, and said therein that this God of the earth has dominion over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. Genesis 1:28. In their profound study of natural phenomena, the masters of old discovered that there is positively no extinction whatever of life in the case of any living thing upon the earth. This is what they discovered. The grain which thou sowest is not quickened in rebirth except it die. The Bible, 1 Corinthians 15:36. That is one of the greatest discoveries in all the history of humanity, and it should be the most inspiring knowledge that man can acquire, to learn that what appears as extinction by death, to the man of darkness, to him who lives by sight, to the credulous dupes who follow religion and science like dumb cattle led to a slaughter, is actually and definitively a new birth, a glorious resurrection, a future life, and so indicated in the ancient symbols and allegories. When you pick up a deck of tarot cards, it's not that these things, oh, it looks like God. No, they're not saying it looks like God. It's the language. Of course, I guess some deck painters are saying, ooh, these are what the gods look like. But again, you don't have to take it that way if you don't want to. The church fathers knew this. The biblical makers knew this. And that is the reason why they destroyed the ancient wisdom. It had been done to conceal the illustrious knowledge from the masses. The masters were guided by analogy. They discovered the great secret of life. They solved the perplexing mystery of death by observing the dying process. In the case of planted grain, and the great philosopher recorded that discovery in his epistle to the Corinthians. Apollonius Poetius Powell pointed out that the facts of the planted grain does not die. What actually occurs is strictly a creative process which results in the natural disintegration of the body of the grain, changing that created body back to the original elements of which it was constituted, while at the same time the life of the grain, the uncreated entity, the eternal life principle, continues right on to live in the new plant that rises from the ashes of the created body of the grain, and that which has happened to the grain has had no effect whatever upon the life principle of the grain. Nothing has died, nothing dies. There is no death. Death is but a word freely used by the religionists to frighten the masses and force them into the church. We've heard the legend of the phoenix that rises to new life from its own ashes. That legend is based upon the discoveries of the masters. This bird was described as the size of an eagle. It was said to live 600 years in the wilderness. Some say 1,000, some say 100 even. Then it built for itself a funeral pile of aromatic wood, which ignited with the fanning of its wings, and it emerged from the flames with a new life. Yeah, it never died. It was just a jinn putting on a show, right? Pretty cool sounding show, right? In the early part of the 14th century, the church burnt to cinders Jacques de Molay, Grand Master of the Templars, for the crime against God of sun worship, as told by Professor Hoekema in his work Cosmic Creation. Almont was the first Grand Master who succeeded de Molay, and he was called the restorer of the order He adopted for his seal a phoenix, brooding on the flames, with the motto, Ardet ut vivat. She burns that she may live. That sounds like a rock song, doesn't it? A mighty appropriate symbol for many angles. Living creatures pass on to the future life, through the gateway of death. There is no other road. Man lives to die and dies to live. There are no exceptions in the law of creation, which has no exceptions save in the minds of the religionists, the scientists, evolutionists, and the deceived masses. And as the law of eternal life rules the vegetal kingdom, a fact we have presented in the case of the planted grain, then we know, by the law of analogy, that it also rules the animal and human kingdoms, which are far superior to the vegetal. And as New Age realms, we can say the human realm is the mental, and the etheric would be the vegetal, and the animal would be the like the astral, or the astrophysical, or maybe the human's just the soul, the rest of them's like the animal and the vegetable. The ancient masters regarded man as the god of creation, the lord of the whole earth, and his journey through the dark, changing terrestrial world here below ended up in the rim of the eastern horizon as the dawn of Easter light. The ark shrine of the god reached at last the bright land over the Eridanus River, which land is never trodden by the dark feet of death. And the enthralled god disembarked to take a new journey in the majestic ship of the celestial world, beginning its voyage of a life endless of days across the shining sea of eternity. The cabin door was opened wide for the God of glory to enter, and he advanced amidst the joyful exclaim of the host of devotees who will follow him someday. As they hailed him who is risen from his own ashes, victorious over the dark world of earthly imprisonment, and they shouted in a grand chorus, "Death is swallowed up in victory, O death, where's thy sting? O grave, where's thy victory?" Well, that's not too grand of a chorus, but 1 Corinthians 15, 54 and 55. To limn the actuality of this extraordinary experience lies beyond the limit of any human language. The ancient masters did not attempt to describe it orally or literally. They consorted to symbols and fables, and these they interpreted in their temples to the neophyte, who proved by rigid test to be worthy to receive the sacred wisdom. The 15th chapter of the Pauline epistles to the Corinthians discloses that he attempted to do this, and that chapter by the great philosopher Apollonius marks the climax of the creative sublimity attained in the New Testament. Its oracular grandeur, wrote Dr. Kuhn, should have lifted up the body of Christian theology far above the midst of controversy that overhang it as to the question of the corporal resurrection, and he wisely added, but the latter formulators of orthodox theology looked askance at Paul Apollonius and classed him as a heretic. He would have ousted his epistles from the canon if they had dared, for he had grown in disfavor among them because he presented bald facts. His philosophy was not in accord with the misleading policy of the literators of the religious ancient drama of the crucified God and his resurrection. He was the exponent of the Orphic Platonic wisdom of the Chaldeans and Egyptians, which they had come to revile. He indicted more than one of the grandest chapters in their Bible, yet they frowned upon him because his writing was not in harmony with their cult Christianity. His was cosmic Christianity, cosmic philosophy. It was embodied in terms of Platonic Gnosticism, the very flower of Greek rational mysticism, Orphic paganism glows throughout the 15th chapter of Corinthians, in spite of the garbled and distorted manner in which it appears in the Bible, to put the church, Jesus, in the picture. The sublimest chapter in the Christian Bible is purely pagan, and referring to pagan as ancient, that's highly inappropriate. As I don't like pagan, heathen as terms for religion, and Gentile's kind of sinister too, but Gentile actually means something, doesn't it? Lost Light, page 573. Dr. James Clark of Scotland made what may be termed an important prophetic assertion when he said, "The day may not be far distant when man can depart from what now appears to have been the greatest of all follies of evil, the indoctrination of our innocent children in the multitude of superstitious beliefs, through which the various systems of social control and enslavement have been perpetuated and fastened upon each succeeding generation. Eternal time, realizing how hard it is to kill these money-making schemes, we cannot be so optimistic as to believe that any of these sordid systems to which Dr. Clark refers will perish and vanish within the next 1,000 years. Neither should we forget that religion, the worst of these, is the oldest, the biggest, and the richest racket in the world." Now, let's distinguish religion and church. It was founded on the great fear of death. It spends time teaching men to fear death, and its very foundation is utterly destroyed when the real facts of death are properly presented and properly understood. Now, whether I'm going to talk about Buddhism or something else, the point is that we get beyond any of these apprehensions that cause us to, we should be satisfied with our, figure out how to live a life we can be satisfied enough with to not suffer about, oh, we're going to die. Yes. You're going to die, don't worry. Its very foundation is utterly destroyed when the real facts of death are properly presented and properly understood. Dr. Willard Carver, the world's greatest chiropractor, who died in 1943 at the age of 80, wrote, "Human beings generally conceive that they are learning about themselves when they study history and science, but all they are really doing in such study is getting farther away from the self. For after all, the study of history and the sciences furnishes us nothing of value as to the self. For history always fades into tradition, and tradition becomes lost in the night of time, and the so-called sciences, when investigated with sufficient care and analysis, resolve themselves into theories, and the theories finally resolve themselves into the misty substance of phantoms, and lose themselves in the vortex of empty speculation. While theories should never be empty speculations, theories should be based on all the facts to date. That's why people can say that a theory is greater than what a fact could ever be, because a theory is working the facts, right? Therefore, he who would study self must confine his investigation to self. He must realize the fact of his existence as paramount to all other facts, and must bring himself to understand that all we can ever know of self must be ascertained by the means of introspection through the process of deduction, and may come to understand in the analysis of self lies his only field of research. And that's preface to Psychology 1920. And that's an advantage that some people will list for autism, although I don't think it's referring to people for autism, is the self-referral. Now, in a negative sense, somebody said, I'm a introverted. The psychologist says that I'm an introverted, malignant narcissist. Now, that person later went on to rob a bunch of people and rape actual rape, and wouldn't be surprised if anything else turns up in their criminal record in the future. Neither would their parents. Carver takes us directly back to the remarkable statement of Apollonius in the Bible, to the effect that the kingdom of man and life are within the human organism, Luke 17:21, and to learn more about man and life, We shall gain that knowledge only by a study of man and life, in connection with the study of all other living things upon earth. For we get lost as soon as we attempt to separate and set man apart from all the rest of creation. Man is not only a part of creation, but the very climax of creation. Beyond! You know, to imitate how Ren and Stimpy would have done it. But that's the thing. Religion is a relationship with God and His creation. It's not just you sit around meditating and you have the rights of people and the proper reference to God. That's what religion really is. So you got to do what's right by all these creatures. Land of Light. Oh, I don't think that. Eliphas Levi claimed, a prisoner devoid of books, had he a tarot of which he knew how to make use, might in a few years possess a universal science and discourse on all possible subjects with an unequaled doctrine and inexhaustible eloquence. Now, some tarot texts are banned from prisons. There's supposed to be religious freedom, right? Now, if there's a picture in a book, in a church book or something, do they ban the church book? If there's a picture, one of those prints of an old statue or woodwork or something, but oh no, it's a tarot, so we can ban the tarot. Because you try to send a tarot deck to a prisoner or something. Now, I don't. Now, speaking of prisoners, I'm not at all agreeing or supporting things. I'm for people's reform, and obviously you got to keep your distance from some individuals. Good thing when you do the chaplain thing, there's guards around, but chaplains even get killed. So man, the unknown, the most mysterious of all creatures. What is man? What is his future? Okay, there's not really a quote that I'm noticing that, because I'm trying to go through this quick to see if there's something to add to this. The old order of the Dark Ages is passing and being replaced by the new. The new is rising from the ashes of the lost wisdom of the ancient masters. We learn from the secret of the ancient masters that the human ego, soul, is the real man. Without beginning, without end, it moves with the same cosmic cycle as the cosmic elements which constitute all phenomena, both physical and metaphysical. And so this greater doctor met the fate that usually befalls these honored men who would disseminate light in a floundering world. And as the son of perfection,